was intrigued by your documentary, mostly because I practice Buddhism as well. And I was familiar with Wayne and Herbie from that vantage point, but I didn't know how Wayne got there. So this documentary showed me how he got there.
Yeah.
Having said that, when did you first discover Wayne Shorter?
Wayne and I met in the 90s. I was a music video director then. I had just gotten out of film school, and Wayne and I was hired by Verve to do his High Life video. And I had that experience with him, and we became friends for life after that. Very, very close friends with him and his family.
Oh, cool. That's really cool. What kind of music? I'm just curious. What were you just doing music videos for jazz artists or artists in all genres?
Artists in all genres, mainly independent bands. I had an agent, and she just called me one day and she said, well, I have a project for you. It's for a jazz legend. And at that time, I knew Miles Davis. I knew the typical, the bigger names. And I didn't know who Wayne Shorter was. But when I met him and I found out what he had accomplished, I was amazed. And I was amazed that I didn't know who Wayne Shorter was and why the general public doesn't know who Wayne Shorter is. And that it was my mission, was to change that.
Well, you did. I'm going to tell you that. You did that right now. You did that and then some. Yes, you did, ma'am. What would you say in the process of putting this series together? What was the most surprising thing that you learned about Wayne in putting this together? Because, it's one thing to meet someone under the circumstances that you did, but then in doing something this intimate and this personal, you begin to learn some other things.
Well, having been in his life for so long and had the privilege and the honor to be in his personal life, I understood him on a personal and spiritual level, but I had no idea how broad his influence in music was and how many collaborations and how many artists he actually influenced that were outside of the genre. And that was astounding to me. And I'm like, what? I thought he was a jazz musician, but he wasn't just a jazz. He was a composer and so highly regarded by so many, but more so that whenever anybody spoke about Wayne Shorter, they just used the word love. And I think because he emanated such pure love in what he did and how he interacted with every human being he came in contact with.
Well, thank you for giving me that answer. That was beautiful. I want to talk about the aesthetic of your piece, about how there's a lot of black and white archival footage. There's a lot of black and white reenactments. There's a lot of black and white charcoal things happening. And I wanted to know why you chose to intersperse those things along with telling his story.
Well, first of all, I didn't have a lot of footage to work with because Wayne didn't really, he lived in a time where people were not documenting themselves or what they did. So most of the first Portal, I had to recreate a lot of things because I just had a handful of concerts and I had some photographs that Wayne, and they were professional photographs. I wanted something more intimate. And so I decided to recreate it. But Wayne's love for cinema was really what drove it, is that I was going to make this a cinematic experience because he was greatly influenced by moving pictures. So that was the reason. And each Portal has its own palette, its own look to it. And that was intentional.
Great. I'm glad that you brought up his love of cinema, because when he started talking about the red shoes, I have never in my entire life heard any man in any genre of entertainment reference the red shoes. So that was really, because usually when you talk to artists that are women, that's the first thing that pops out of their mouth, especially if they're dancers or singers or stage performers. First thing out of their mouth is something about the red shoes. They even reference the red shoes in a chorus line, right? But I've never heard a man reference it. So having said all of that, were you a fan of the red shoes?
I love the red shoes. It's a beautiful film, but not to the degree that Wayne did. But I understood even more so through time why he loved that film so much. It represented so much of his own journey, of that balance of having a life and being an artist. It's a difficult balance, and having agency over your own life rather than giving it over to a big, entity that could envelop you very quickly.
I loved how you talked about his Buddhist practice, and one of our staples of our Buddhist practice, Asoka Gakkai, is turning poison into medicine. And this was an individual who seemed like he spent his entire life doing that. He was constantly being put in a poisonous place where he had to turn it into medicine for his own mental sanctity, right?
Right.
So having said that, how do you feel about that particular phrase coming out on the other side of this project?
Well, I watched that in action almost every day of Wayne's life. I heard him inspire others when they were having difficulty. I went to Buddhist meetings because I'm a Buddhist as well. And the whole film is constructed in that manner. Is that how he grew to greatness through adversity? And so it is a big Buddhist movie in some ways.
I didn't catch that until the second chapter. Fear into fearlessness, or I think is what it's called. And yes. I was like, oh, we're going to go there. We're going to show the scroll. We're going to show the beads. Yeah. We're going to do all that. Okay. I was like, all right, Dorsay, I love you. I was very excited. I was like, oh, yay. I was very excited. Having said that, I'm just curious that if your Buddhist practice and his Buddhist practice being a staple of his life, if that influenced the title of the series, Zero Gravity. Where did that title come from?
Wayne didn't come up with the title of the movie, but he often used zero gravity for when it came to his music, but it represented something so much bigger, as Wayne always, everything he does has this underpinning, underlying philosophical ideals. So for him, that zero gravity is present moment, fear, without any mandate, non-conformity to any higher, mandate. And so I think for him, zero gravity that's in his music, there are sections where they go into the zero gravity space, where they're free to improvise, to be completely in that moment and not on the page. So musically, yes, but he applies that to his life in many ways.
Speaking of that, as we close out our conversation, I know we lost him earlier this year, and having worked on this project for a while, I'm imagining, and gathering all this information from him and having these really intimate conversations with him about his life and his journey and his career and his sound. How would you describe his sound coming out on the other side of this project now after working on this series?
Wayne's sound is a dialogue with every individual listener. He is transmitting a high frequency that's beyond the five senses, that is encouraging you to be the master of your own destiny, that your freedom is yours and no one can take it away from you, and stay very true to your own mission in life. I always believe that his intention is that every time he plays a note, is to transmit that to every listener.
That is a beautiful way to end this conversation. Dorsay, thank you so very much for carving time out of your day for me. Nam myoho renge kyo, my sister.
Take care. Bye-bye. Thank you.